Note to script, never ever steal Drake eggs. Ever.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another episode of Tyria Talk. My name is Richie Procopio, aka Otter, and this show is all about Guild Wars 2. Today is episode number 85. Today I want to talk about some new information that we got about raiding as a result of TwitchCon, but also I sent ArenaNet a list of raiding questions, and they were kind enough to send me some answers. So I hope I have some brand new stuff in here that hasn't been spoiled already by the live stream last week talking about raids, but I will fill in major information from TwitchCon and also these interview questions. Before I get into the topic, I just want to say real quick that starting tomorrow is the final beta weekend event for Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns. If you want to jump in and try one of the elite professions, this is your chance to do it. They're going to have all the elite professions, including the newly revealed Druid. Also available in this beta weekend event is raid testing. They're going to have the very first raid boss available for all guilds to jump in there and start tackling that content to try their luck out, see what kind of strategies are going to be needed to take these things out. So if you're interested in jumping in and trying any of these things, all you need to do is pre-purchase Heart of Thorns and you get an automatic access to the beta weekend event. You don't have to download a separate launcher. It's all tied to the same launcher, so it's really cool. There's a referral link in the description below. If you use that to buy Heart of Thorns expansion, it directly supports my work. Okay, now on to the interview topics. I got answers from Reid and Andy McLeod, and they are both game designers at ArenaNet. And here are the questions that I asked. And keep in mind that I asked these before TwitchCon, so some of this stuff is a little bit redundant. So the first question I asked is, are the encounters being tuned to require a full 10-person raid to be in full ascended weapons and armor, complete with consumables? And their answer was yes. Since Ascended gear has been in the game for a while, it's something you can go work on right now before the raid shipped and be prepared. This is a little bit surprising to me. I kind of was under the assumption that it would be a lot easier to do in Ascended gear, but a group that was all decked out in exotics and knew what they were doing would probably be successful as well, but that doesn't seem to be entirely the case. We'll have to see when that comes out if their tuning is correct or not, but at least that's their aim right now. So I went on to ask, how would a raid team fare in all exotic gear? And they answered, the raid wings should incrementally become more difficult. The first boss shouldn't be impossible to defeat unless you're in full best in slot gear. The last boss should require you to be in full ascended gear, however. A highly skilled team in all exotic gear could probably get past the first boss, but not much further. All right, again, that surprised me. And this is what they're aiming for. It's probably a little bit difficult to tune this kind of stuff without having like massive amounts of people running at these bosses. But at least this is what their aim is for. They definitely are looking to make this really challenging. So that extra, 5 to 7% in stats that you get for putting on all ascended gear is going to make a difference in these fights, apparently. All right, continuing to talk about loot, I then asked, will players get personal loot drops like other areas of the game? There aren't any plans to have bosses drop loot that need to be distributed through a master loot mechanic like other games, right? And they responded that players will each get their own loot rolls consistent with how loot is awarded elsewhere in the game. Players don't need to compete for drops. They went on to say that ultimately we decided that creating a new loot distribution system that was only used exclusively in one area of the game just felt out of place. All right, it's kind of what we expected, but I just wanted to kind of make sure. The next question was, are ascended weapons and armor possible loot drops in raids? And they said, yes, raid bosses can drop ascended gear. We got some more information out of TwitchCon regarding this, which is basically that you can get ascended gear, tomes of experience, which give you a huge chunk of XP towards masteries, exclusive skins that are exclusive to raids. The tongue boss has a pretty cool looking shield, and one of the bosses has a pretty cool flamethrower that has a rifle skin and a napalm backpack. Alright, next up I ask, will all of the standard legendary gifts be required in order to make legendary armor? For example, to make a full set of legendary armor, will players need 6 gifts of exploration and have to do world completion on 3 different characters to obtain them? And they said no. The process of creating legendary armor is similar to creating legendary weapons, but it does not use the same gifts. The new mastery gift does not require gifts of exploration, but instead requires items that can only be acquired by killing raid bosses. Most of the new gifts require similar activities and materials as the weapon gifts, but incorporate the expansion and raids and take into consideration that players will need to upgrade 6 pieces of armor. Expect it to be similar process to the new legendary journey, and a full set of legendary armor to cost roughly the same as a single legendary weapon. So this is good news overall. The fear was if I have to make 6 legendary armor pieces that are all going to be a similar process and expense and time commitment as creating a legendary weapon, well then this is going to take forever. So I like the fact that an entire 6-piece legendary suit of armor costs about the same and requires a similar amount of work as one legendary weapon. That's really cool. And it makes me sort of think about the Gifts of Exploration thing a little bit. I've been trying to work on map completion a bit in anticipation of needing more gifts, and I'm not sure. It sounds like for sure that legendary armor doesn't require Gifts of Exploration, but I don't know if the new legendary weapons are going to require it or they're going to do it a whole different way. So maybe the Gifts of Exploration are only going to be used for the old legendary weapons. I'm not sure how necessary they're going to be going forward. I then asked, are there going to be chances for rare items to drop for players each time they go raiding, or will the rewards be awarded through a currency system where players put time in and eventually they'll buy their loot from a vendor? They responded that there are rare rewards which drop from each boss. However, we are also awarding a unique currency that is earned by participating in raids. This currency can be used to purchase the rare boss rewards, among other things, for players who are particularly unlucky, though a player must have killed a boss to purchase any of their unique rewards. This is a great hybrid system, I think. You know, I don't think that players just wanted it to be like a token system, just like the dungeons are, because that makes it a little bit less exciting to do the dungeon runs, right? You can actually calculate, all right, you know, for the next 3 times I do this dungeon, I'm not going to actually get a piece of loot because I'm saving up currency to buy it from a vendor. I like that there's this excitement of, ooh, I can't wait to see what I get from these bosses this week. And, you know, you can get lucky and get something really cool. But there's also the fallback in case you just have a terrible streak of luck and you can eventually get the stuff that you want. I like that system quite a bit. I then asked, special mini pets were mentioned as possible rewards for raiding. Could you give us a hint? And the response I got was, he has a lot of tongues. Now, they also mentioned this on the TwitchCon livestream, which makes me think that they took my question and used it on there. But so everybody probably already knows that they're having a mini pet with a lot of tongues. The tongue boss seems to be a mini pet. That's gonna be cool, and I could do a voice for him, you know, just like I did in the Bad Foley videos. Come on, guys, let me give you a lick. All right, never mind. That's kind of gross. All right, next up, I asked if there's going to be any outside testing of the raid content prior to it being released. This was before TwitchCon, obviously, so now we all know that you'll be able to check out the first encounter in the raids during BWE 3. So this weekend, we're going to be able to test it and jump in there and see what the first boss is like. I imagine that there's probably other outside folks that are testing the rest of the raid. Since this is the last beta weekend event, I can't imagine they're going to release, you know, the first wing of raids having only the first boss tested. But this will allow them to see a large influx of players trying it out so they can kind of adjust some feedback there. So it's good to know that there is outside testing. Very, very good. The last thing that ArenaNet needs is to release their first wing of raids and just have a bevy of problems harm them. It would be disappointing overall. So I really hope they get this right on the first shot out, and everybody just loves this new content. Okay, next up, I asked, how will raid lockouts work? And they responded, there are weekly raid lockouts when the instance spins up a new day. For example, if you defeat the first encounter on a Tuesday, when you raid again on Wednesday, you'll start at the second encounter. You could have someone who hasn't raided for the week spin up the instance on Wednesday and start at the first encounter, but anyone who has already defeated it won't receive the rewards. All right, and when they're saying spin up, I assume they like the person that launches the instance. So if I've already beaten 2 bosses this week and I start the instance and people join my instance, then the first 2 bosses are going to be dead and we can progress right to the third one. That's great for a steady group that wants to continue their progress rather than start over every single time with boss respawns and stuff like that. But the contrary is also true. If, let's say, I have 5 people in my raid group that have already killed the first boss this week and 5 people that haven't, well, you know what? We can have somebody that hasn't killed the boss start the instance and we can help them get their rewards for the week. So I love that. It's very flexible in that regard. There's no lockout that's tied to a specific character that's going to prevent like the entire guild, for example, from taking out bosses that have already been done that week. I think that's a pretty good system. And a quick follow-up to that, I asked, does everything reset with the weekly reset like guild missions? And they said yes. Raids use the same progress bit system, so they reset on the same day and time as guild missions. All right, moving on from loot questions, I asked, will player buffs in raids affect the entire 10-person raid team or still the 5-player limit? With the 5-player limit, are there concerns over having to stack certain classes in the raid in order to get all the available buffs? And they responded that player boons and raids will still work the same way they currently do and are capped at 5. We're against raising the cap to 10 since we don't like the idea of the supergroup approach to building your raid composition. A supergroup would be taking one of every single profession and then locking yourself into specific trait lines that passively increase the damage output of your group. These passive increases are also multiplicative. I hate that word. So it would blow out balance very fast, and we'd have to balance everything around the supergroup composition first instead of roles. From a design standpoint, this would make designing raid encounters and the roles associated with each encounter much more difficult and limiting. From a player standpoint, it puts a lot of additional pressure on raid leaders and recruiters. It's not going to feel great when someone can't show up one night and the substitute raider is not the desired profession. Performance is also something to consider as well, since this would create a relatively large performance hit on the game in general. World vs. World would suffer quite a bit from this change like this. We actually had investigated 10-player boon caps, and ultimately the cons outweighed the pros, and it was scrapped. There's a couple reactions to this. I understand what they're going for here. First of all, I wasn't trying to suggest that we should increase the cap to a 10-player boon everywhere. I would think that would only work in a raiding situation. And so the feedback about World versus World and performance hits in general, I wasn't thinking with that regard. Now I understand that complicates things in that having some mechanics work one way in one game type and a different way in another is kind of jarring, so I totally understand them not wanting to do that separately like that. And I guess what they're saying here is if they increased the boon cap to 10 players, then you really could get pretty much all the boons in there, and you would want to run one of each profession in your raids at least. And that's kind of it's kind of limiting, right? In order to be the maximum effectiveness that we can be, we need to have all the classes represented. And what if we don't have our Revenant online this week? Does that mess things up because they've tuned the bosses to be really hard because they're expecting this super group? So I understand all of that feedback. With that said, I do think there are some concerns here. So the player base is still going to try to min-max as much as possible, right? Especially if these are very difficult encounters. They're going to look and say, all right, since we only can have a certain buff that we need affect 5 people, we're going to need 2 warriors, or we're going to need 2 elementalists or something like that, so we can make sure that this really important buff gets spread about the entire raid group. So it doesn't necessarily make you want to bring one of each profession, but now it makes you want to take 2 at least of some of the key professions that are going to be able to provide a larger number of boons, right? So the meta might become, all right, you really need 2 guardians every single raid, or you really need 2 warriors every single raid, whatever it happens to be. And so you still get that idea of limiting raid groups being a challenge to guilds, right? If you don't have your second elementalist on this week, are you screwed because you don't have enough buffs to go around? So their feedback in the beginning of that answer kind of works regardless of what you do. Players are going to try the path of least resistance always, and they're going to try to take every advantage they can in there. So instead of saying, yeah, we want one of every single profession in the raid, they're going to try to make sure that they have 2 of every profession that brings out the most amount of raid boons to the group. So it's going to be an issue, and especially with people that are going to go for any kind of world first or want to tackle this content very, very quickly. They're going to try to stack the groups, and it's going to be a little bit of an interesting situation where suddenly some classes and professions are going to be a lot less useful to the raid overall. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know. I see there's bad and good on both sides of this coin. At least the ArenaNet is clear on their stance on this. We'll see how it plays out. I asked, can we assume that waypoints and revive orbs will be disabled during combat and raids? And this says the raids will use a checkpoint system similar to fractals, and revive orbs are completely disabled. I then went on to ask, many folks in the community believe that having a raid size set to 10 players seems a bit out of character for Guild Wars 2. Many events and world bosses scale in difficulty as the number of players increase. Did you explore the possibility of offering flexible raid group sizes, for example 10 to 30 players, and why did you ultimately choose not to do it? Their answer was, flexible scaling came up at one point in time, and ultimately we decided against this. We want raids to have a competitive environment. Scaling is amazing in the open world, but in a controlled environment it could very quickly become a game of trying to figure out precisely which scale is easiest to kill the boss. We've seen things in the past where players are able to manipulate event scaling, and ultimately we didn't want to recreate that situation. All right, this is kind of an answer that I expected to hear. It's good to know that they considered using flexible rating. I talked about this in a previous Tyria Talk. I really wish they had some sort of flexible system in there. And I don't necessarily think that they should have taken the scaling system that they already have in the game for the open world and just recreated that in raids. I think it would have to be more precisely tweaked than that and kind of figure out something like, all right, this particular raid boss looks like this with 10 players. It looks like this with 15 players, 20 players, etc. Maybe add different abilities to it. In addition to just scaling up the health and the damage and stuff like that, they would need some sort of different mechanics in there, and then they'd have to scale up the or actually they wouldn't have to do much with the loot system because it would be a personal loot reward system. But anyway, World of Warcraft is able to do this right now. I haven't tried it over there, but I love the idea of anybody from 10 to 25 people can join the raid, and the raid will automatically adjust to that. It's definitely going to be jarring for a lot of guilds to suddenly figure out, all right, who gets the raid tonight and who doesn't. And it's something we haven't really had to do, at least in my guild personally. It's like we do guild missions every week, and everybody can be included, and we don't have to worry about things. Now we're suddenly worried about, all right, are you in all extended gear? Okay, and do you know how to play your class? And this week we don't have enough room, so some people have to sit out. So all of these things are going to be challenges for guilds going forward into the Heart of Thorns expansion as a result of raids. All right, the rest of the information I'm going to share with you comes out of the TwitchCon stream that they did, where they had a whole panel about designing raids, and thanks to Dolphy for putting out a summary in there to kind of help me organize my thoughts a little bit. So they asked on one of the questions they answered on the TwitchCon stream was, can you pug these? All right, if you don't know what the word pug means, it's a pickup group. Can you just go in there with a random 10 people that you don't know? You might not be on voice chat with them. Can you just go in with a group of strangers and tackle these instances, these raids? And Mike Z said, if you're really, really good pug group, maybe you can take out the first or second boss, but we want these to be a true challenge. And Crystal Reid came in and said that he was being really generous. The first boss is actually really hard. So pugging, my theory is, or my opinion on this is, a lot of times developers will say these kind of things, and then the pug groups are really surprising, right? Over time, these tactics will become very familiar. People will be very familiar with their classes. So sure, right when hot launches and these raids are brand new, that's going to be very, very challenging, and I wouldn't expect too many pug groups to make progress. But over time, that will probably change. You might have some good pug raid leaders that suddenly they come up and they say, hey, they'll post on the forums, I'm going to be doing raid at this time, or they'll post in general chat, and they know what they're doing. And if there's a good leader, and maybe they have their own personal voice chat that people can jump on, you can be surprised what a good pug group can do. But certainly in the beginning, it's probably going to be a little rough for anybody who wants to join one of those pugs. They then spoke about whether or not there's extra rewards for guilds who are completing these raids in a full guild group. And they said that reward chests will drop trophies players can get and show off in their guild hall, and each boss has a unique trophy. Okay, so we get to cut off their heads and put them on our wall. Perfect! They then spoke about how raid wings will work. They said that wings are released one at a time. The first wing will be released sometime after hot ships before the holidays. The first wing will give you some background story that is continued in Wing 2 and 3. The second wing will have a huge, awesome mega reveal and will be released in early 2016. And once all the wings are unlocked, you can kind of go to any one that you want by picking it in the pop-up list when you enter the instance. Now, I'm glad to see that there's going to be story involved in the raids, right? And I spoke about this in a previous Tyria Talk as well. I definitely want there to be an engaging story. It's not just go in and smash bosses in the face. But I want it to kind of be like an ancillary story that runs along the main storyline. It's not going to be something that you really need to experience in order to get the full story and hot. But what they said here about a huge, awesome mega reveal sometime in the second wing in 2016, that makes me a little bit nervous. What is this awesome reveal? If it's kind of as impactful as oh my god, the Solvari are servants of Mordramoth, if it's one of those kind of shocking reveals, having it only taking place in a second wing of a really difficult raid, that kind of is a little bit excluding. what if my guild can't defeat these wing bosses? I have to learn about this super awesome mega reveal like by watching someone else's video, or what if I don't even have a guild? What if I just play the game solo and I don't even want to raid? I'm not going to be able to experience that except by hearsay. I don't know. It's a little bit I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. I'm not going to panic about it because I don't know what the huge, awesome mega reveal is. I mean, maybe it's just something like, oh, it's a really cool monster, or maybe there's, an NPC, in there that we haven't heard about in a long time. I don't know what it is. So, but that makes me a little bit nervous. We've seen this before where they have too much story tied up into raiding, and then a large percent of the population doesn't get to experience that. So we'll keep that in the back of our minds as a possible concern down the road. We'll see how it plays out. And the final bit of information we gleaned from the TwitchCon live stream was how many raids can you crank out per year? And their response was they're trying to find their pace. They're looking at 6 wings per year, maybe. A full raid is probably like 3 wings, but you can do raids with just 1 wing if you have a specific story to tell. So it looks like we're going to get the first full raid. It's going to take months for it to all ramp out. The first one coming a little bit after the Heart of Thorns releases. The second wing coming out in early 2016. I guess the third wing would come out maybe March, April, May timeframe in 2016. And maybe we'll see 3 more wings of the second raid come out sometime throughout the rest of the year in 2016. All right, so it's a pretty decent pace. What I would like them to do is maybe like every few months just come out with a wing. And I think that would work out really, really well. Over time, since these raids, they don't really become obsolete, right? You don't have this problem that you have in other MMOs where you outgear something. You're constantly improving the power of your gear, and so they have to make a new tier of raiding that's even more powerful with more powerful loot in it. So that's not going to happen in Guild Wars 2. All of the power level is going to stay the same. So over time, as they keep releasing more and more raid tiers, you just have more content that remains relevant. So if your guild really wants to make sure every single week they're wiping out all of the raids so to maximize the personal rewards for everybody, and then over time, it's going to get to be pretty lengthy, right? It's like, all right, we're going to do 6 wings this week, or we're going to do 9 wings this week. So we'll see how the community reacts to that, and how they, it's going to be an individual decision type thing. You might say, all right, most of our people in our guild have most of what they need from this wing of this raid now, so we're going to skip that from now on. So that'll be interesting to work out. Well, that's going to wrap things up. A huge thank you to Crystal Reid and Andy McLeod for answering these questions for me. I know you guys are super busy, but I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I hope you guys learned some cool things about raiding in Guild Wars 2. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video. Hit that thumbs up, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.